Okay, I can start presenting. I see that there are already uh, quite a few people in here, so welcome everybody. My name is Francesco. I'm working for Fab City, for the Fab City Foundation. Especially, I'm a project manager within the EU project. So you're all welcome. This is a series of roundtables that is developed and financed by both two activities that Fab City is doing. One is the European project, so in particular the under the PENCE project. PENCE is PENCE means it's a EU Commission project, Power Europe Narrative for Civic Ecology, and it focuses on addressing climate change and environmental issues through citizen engagement and the cultural and creative sectors and industries. The Fab City Roundtables, this is actually the third one of a few others, consist in a series of online events that are integral to the PENCE project. Um, I would just like to remember everybody that this online session will be recorded and later on will be published on our YouTube channel in case of someone cannot participate in all of it. I would like also to leave the floor now to my colleague Dan, that he is a project manager in the programs MDDI. Uh,
Yes, thank you, Francesco. Hi all, I'm Dan Solomons. I'm the program coordinator of the Master in Design for Distributed Innovation at Fab City Foundation, which is partly co-hosting this session today. And I'm happy to welcome today's speaker. She's a leading expert in circular economy, systems change, and regenerative development. She holds a Master of Science in Sustainable Development on the topics energy and resources from Utrecht University in the Netherlands, and has spent her career guiding governments, businesses, and industries in accelerating the transition to circular and regenerative economies. She, as a senior in innovation and global alliances lead at Circular Economy, she led strategy development for cities and industries, including the Amsterdam City Doughnut and their famous and ambitious circular economy strategy. And now leading her own consultancy, Ilektra advises global organizations like the European Commission and the Doughnut Economics Action Lab and many more on integrating regenerative and distributive practices. So with this incredible resume, we are happy to have Ilektra sharing some of her expertise with us today. And after her talk, we will have some space for questions. But for now, please join me in welcoming Ilektra Kouloumpi. The floor is
Hi,
yours.
Dan, and hi, everyone. Nice to be here with all of you. I really hope that we will have an interesting exchange. I'm happy to be bringing the work to this network of Fab City, the work I have been doing with new economic thinking and putting it in practice and in action, actually in city and the built environment. I'm gonna be sharing a presentation for like about 40 minutes, and I'm happy if you put on the chat questions that come in your mind, so that we can pick them up in the end and have a conversation. There will be anyhow room for questions so that you can raise your hand, but it's also nice if something emerges while I'm talking, that you have the chance to put it on the chat. So that's a little bit more interactive. There will be also a moment that I will ask you a question, and I hope to get some of your answers back in the chat. I see that most of you don't have your cameras on, so if you like, I would love to see your faces, so that it feels a bit more interactive. Thank you. Thank you. Nice to see you. So, starting a bit with my who I am and my background, I'm coming from an engineering background, electrical engineering, and I studied, as Dan said, sustainable development in the Netherlands. But I got there really fascinated by buildings and cities and how we can transform them towards a more sustainable way. And from there on, I worked a lot in the space of built environment, either as a policy analyst or as a researcher. And slowly, I started entering in this space of a new economy and circular economy and systems change. And I started to love economics when I realized that the word economics comes, I mean, also from a Greek word that is a synthesis of two words, ikos and nemome, from ancient Greek, which actually means the house and managing. So this is the art of managing our household. And it feels quite a different science nowadays, but on its root and on its core, it's a really basic practice of how do we care, how do we manage the household, and what is our common household? Um, our common household is our planet, and we have one planet to share as home and live. And it seems that we have very different, yeah, we have developed a quite absurd way to manage it. And I'm curious to hear from you on the chat, just what comes to your mind about who is managing currently our household. What would you say? Who is behind the management of this home that we have? I'm here waiting to share some answers from you. I'm hearing different thoughts about who is behind the management of the household. Extractivists, companies, politics are managing it. Women owning the work, billionaires. The economy, nobody is managing. Huge corporations. Yeah. So all of this and monopoly giants, all of these are true as nature and 20 persons. All of these are true that you're saying. It's quite a complex situation we have made. I like that. It's managing itself somehow as a result of all mini managements and moves. Elon Musk. I wish I didn't have to hear about him today. Property owners. Cool. Yeah, it's so many different entities behind what we have created as a system. And I'm here to talk to you about a new economic model, which I find very fascinating from the time I started working with it. And it's called it goes by the unusual name of the donut. But before starting about new economics, why do we need a new economy? We have, as a generation, inherited deeply degenerative systems. We have inherited a system that takes nature for granted and uses its resources in a depleting way, thinking that they are endless. We have imagined a system and an economic paradigm that takes this all for granted. And with this, we have created and we are navigated in a very thin line of balance. Actually, it seems like we are out of balance for a while now. A paradigm that is driven by overproduction and overconsumption, while at the same time we are witnessing constantly and intensively nowadays the effects of the climate crisis and the general poly crisis that is usually called. It's an image from Athens, where I'm currently based in Greece, from a few days ago, of millions of people protesting out the streets for more justice, but also for the effects of privatizing train network and terrible accident that happened. Social unrest is part of daily life nowadays, as well as ecological crisis and injustices. So this is where this donut comes in. And it's a new way of thinking. Imagine it as a compass for human prosperity. Imagine it as a compass for humans to rethink what it means to thrive. How can we create a thriving humanity? And as you see, it's a model that has two rings. It actually developed. It was developed. It came out in 2017 by the British economist called Kate Raworth. She wrote a book on Doughnut Economics, 7 ways to think like a 21st century economist, which it's a book that draws from different economic thinking, feminist economics, ecological economics, development economics, and brings them all together into this simple but also ingenious model. And why is that? I like it a lot because it brings together in one visual, in one image, humanity's 21st century goal, which is how can we live together? How can we all have a decent life within the means of this one living planet? And as you noticed, as I said before, the model is made out of two concentric rings. There is the internal ring that's called the social foundation, and the external ring, the ecological ceiling. The social foundation actually represents the basic needs, the essentials that people need to have to carry a decent life. According to the model, anyone who falls in the middle of the ring, anyone who falls within this in the ring, it means that they don't have enough to sustain a basic life. They don't have access to water, they don't have food, health, or housing, which are the basic essentials. And this social foundation, this all these different parameters that you see there are actually taken from the Sustainable Development Goals, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, a set of goals that all nations have agreed that this is the foundation that we want for everybody. So if you imagine this internal ring, as we want everyone to be from this circle and above and further, so that everybody has this basic standard of living and better and better. As we are moving outwards to the ring, we want to make sure that we are not pushing against this outer ring that represents the ecological ceiling, the planetary boundaries as they have been measured by the scientists, the Stockholm Resilience Center. And this ceiling represents the Earth's carrying capacity to regenerate itself. And that goes from the amount of chemicals that are in the soils and in the air, the amount of fresh water that we withdraw for farming or housing, the amount of emissions of CO2 and GHG emissions that we have out in the atmosphere, etc., etc. So what happens with this visual with the donut is that it gives us this sweet spot, the balance between those two rings. And this sweet spot is this green space that looks like a donut, where actually everybody has enough. Everyone has met the social foundation. Everyone has met their basic needs without overshooting the boundaries of the planet. So we are within this safe and just space for humanity, which is a space for a regenerative and distributive economy. So from the moment that the donut was developed, it created this powerful visual which, as you see here with the red wedges that you see coming out, this is how Kate called it the first selfie of humanity. It was the first time in history that we could actually see with quantified and qualified indicators and measure all these parameters and see how, as collectively, as a global population, how we are doing. And that's actually even an old visualization from back then when the model was published. You will notice that we are overshooting already 4, but actually by now it's 7. Sorry, no, it's 5 out of 9 planetary boundaries, and we are falling short in total as humanity in all of the social foundation. That means that while people, this 1%, are getting quite more rich every year, we are still collectively don't manage to meet the basic needs for many people, while we are overshooting a lot of all those indicators that show that the Earth is out of its current capacity to come back to balance. And what does it mean? How can we as humanity get back into this green space? How can we reduce the red and go back into this balance and into this green, safe, and just space? We actually need to completely transform the dynamics of the economy and create an economy that is distributive and by design and regenerative by design. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this. So, as I said, our current economic system is following a deeply degenerative path. We make products that we use most likely for a very short period of time, and then we throw them away. This is one line of life. This is a linear, as we say, model that is taking and running down the Earth's resources and the life supporting system. In a donut model, according to the Doughnut model, we are looking to create economies that are regenerative. And here you might recognize this visual of the circular economy, where like in nature, mimicking the patterns of nature, we manage to return materials back and give them another life. When something dies, becomes food for something else, and it keeps on looping. So if we take that a bit further to examples for cities, what does it mean to create to have a regenerative design in cities? Here are some examples where a regeneration comes to practice, and you will think, when you hear regeneration, you will link it a lot with circular economy, with repurposing materials, and also regenerating natural ecosystems. These are the key elements that we see. So we have the case of Freetown, where they did a massive urban reforestation project, and they planted 1 million trees in 2 years to reduce the erosion of soil, but also address the heat island, and they actually really dropped the temperature of the area. We have the case of a sponge city, where a district in Kunli in China has been designed in a way to absorb water and repurpose it and keep a microclimate of a healthy temperature and humidity. Then we have the examples of circular construction in Amsterdam. Again, how circular economy comes in practice when we create buildings either from materials that can be repurposed, or buildings that are modular, so we take components and reuse them, or buildings that are flexible, that means that they can accommodate different uses. All this thinking of creating more opportunities for a structure to be used again in different phases. And last, the industrial symbiosis. This is a case in Denmark where actually we have a partnerships of from 9 different private and public companies with one principle. The waste of one becomes input for the other. So they create a closed loop system where they are they create a symbiosis of resources and exchange. So these are ideas of what it means to create a regenerative economy, a regenerative design in cities. And now the other principle of Doughnut Economics has to do with distribution of resources. And the current system is designed in such a way that opportunity and value is captured only in the hands of few, and that keeps on becoming more and more, creating inequity and lack of opportunities for those around for the bigger majority. So in a donut economy, we are looking to create a distributive dynamic where the opportunity is actually shared and the value is actually shared with all those who co-created and not only with the one person that sits on top. So what does that mean again? And when we talk about cities, we can see the case of the community wealth building. Preston is one of the cities that is very known for that. And that is based on the principle that every city has institutions, hospitals, schools, agencies that have a purchasing power. So how can a city use that power of procurement to purchase from small local cooperatively owned enterprises? Is that me drawing? Uh, and building the local economy. Then we have the case of Vienna, where over 60% of housing in Vienna is affordable housing, half owned by the municipal government and half by non-profit cooperatives. And Vienna has a housing subsidy, which is actually paid from a levy of 1% on the salaries of every Viennese citizen. And half of it is deducted from the wages, and the other half is matched by employers' contributions. So a completely new way of thinking about making housing and this kind of needs accessible for all. Then I'm bringing the case of community land trust in Bogota here. And these are community land trusts are non-profit organizations that are set up by local communities and with local membership that they are designed to deliver homes and housing that remain permanently affordable. So they are advocating, they are bidding, and they are owning land that make it accessible for those that can't afford other developments. This is the case of a self-built housing development at an old school. And last, that we have the case of half houses in Chile that they allow low-income residents to access semi-built structures, affordable housing, where the city invests in the minimum of the structure, and then the residents can incrementally build on top of it and making it their own. Moving forward, I'm going to speak to you. I'm going to talk about how the donut model, this conceptual framework that I just explained, comes more to life and becomes a tool for cities, and how we have used it with cities like Amsterdam to drive policy, strategies, and programs. So cities were the first, uh, let's say, realm where this model, the conceptual model, was became practical. And when we started thinking, how can we translate this concept into something that cities can use? You can imagine this fun game. Imagine that we are unrolling the green donut shape, and we start looking into something like that looks like 4 dimensions, 4 lenses. And you see that at the bottom we have the social foundation, on top we have still the ecological ceiling, and then we start seeing also the differentiation between here, the locality we are talking about, and the world. So what we have created is a tool that has 4 lenses and helps cities to combine into their thinking their local aspirations, how they wanna live here, with their global responsibilities and the impact they have on the planet as a whole. So if we take that a bit further, we start with all cities, all pioneering cities that want to apply the donut, start with this question. How can our city become a home to thriving people in a thriving place while respecting the well-being of all people and the health of the whole planet? So if you notice here, you might see that there are 4 questions within that longer question. And we start with the local lens of, let's say, here is Amsterdam, and the social foundation that actually discusses and questions how can the people of the city, how can the people of Amsterdam thrive, what it means for them. And then we move towards the natural habitat of Amsterdam, and then we start thinking, how does this habitat could operate mimicking nature, and actually how would it look like, what would it do if it would still be nature, what properties would it have? So the other question is, how can our city be as generous as the wildland next door? And then we have 2 more questions that show the global responsibilities, the global impacts of the city. And one has to do with the planet. How can our city respect the health of the whole planet? And how can our city respect the well-being of all people? And let's take each of those lenses a bit further down. So how can all the people of our city thrive? This lens really looks at the differentiation. Each city, each place has its own culture. How can we design cities? How we can design policies? What kind of urban planning mechanism and tools can we apply to make sure that all people thrive, and that every family has a decent home, that people with different income groups are also included, and the voices of everyone have been heard. And you will be noticing that there are some icons here representing the social foundation. How can we take all of them into account when we are designing? Now, this lens that is looking at the ecological aspect locally, the local habitat of the city. This lens is designed, this question actually is designed based on biomimicry. So is 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 thinking, how would the city perform if it was still nature, if it was still wildland, and goes and checks how the wildland next door of the city is performing, what kind of properties it has. It stores carbon, it welcomes wildlife, it actually cycles water, it can harvest energy. It enhances well-being. So wildland does all these things. How could we design our city to do the same? What kind of measures, what kind of design principles do we need to put in here? So these two lenses are checking the local dimension of a city, the locality here, and then we go into the global dimension. And sorry, I'm still looking at the local ecological. So on the global dimension, the cities have a larger impact beyond their boundaries, and that comes from the products that we consume within the boundaries of the city, that they have been produced and transported from elsewhere. And then there's this whole value chain of things that are coming to the city that we don't see. These are the hidden impacts, the indirect impacts of the city that are so far have not been. Most of them we don't know. It's difficult to measure. We might have heard, but we can't do something about. So it's like a bit of the shadow that we live outside of what we're talking about when we work with cities. And so these two lenses are here to bring that into the awareness. So this lens is looking on how the city can respect the health of the whole planet and what is the global footprint of the city through the production, through the consumptions of products, the food, clothing, electronics, consumer goods and materials from construction. As for example, how could we design the city to respect the health of the whole planet? When it comes to construction, how can we build circularly? Thinking of the full life cycle of buildings, or how can we reduce how much we build by retrofitting? How can we produce locally to reduce our global impact, etc.? This is the mindset that we're bringing here. And similarly, when we are talking about the social dimension, there is within this value chain of products that we are using, there are people behind it, that they are producing the food, the clothing, the electronics, and everything that we are consuming. This is the labor behind the label. So how can our city respect these people and the well-being of them? For example, how are the construction elements we use produced? Do we take this into consideration? Are we using certification and labeling? Where are the raw materials coming from? Do we know? Can we trace back? What happens to the construction waste that we produce? Where does it end up going? So this is the kind of bigger picture that we want to see. And all this creates these four lenses that I talked about, which became the tool for cities to start the conversation, to create indicators, to measure their progress beyond traditional financial metrics of success. They measure now through a dashboard of indicators across all these dimensions. Looking at time, I need to go a little bit faster. The example of Amsterdam. Amsterdam was the first city that worked with the donut, but it wasn't just didn't just happen one day. They have been developing for a long time, since 2015, a strong agenda and a vision for creating a circular economy. Here you see some of the earlier works of trying to create connected loops of resources for the construction sector within the city of Amsterdam and create hubs of exchange. And while they were starting to figure out the solution of a circular system and how can they optimize resources, etc., to make a fully circular city, that they wanted to become, they still want to become a fully circular city by 2050. They recognized that this conversation about circularity was lacking a bit the aspect of distribution of resources and of justice and of inclusivity and social inclusion. How could we make a circular city to be accessible for everyone, and make sure that not only those who have who are wealthier are going to profit from it, benefit from it. So that's where we actually decided in 2019 to bring the donut model into the picture and into the whole effort about circular economy, to make sure that we are looking both at the ecological aspects but also of the social aspects of the transition. And that created a big journey of co-creation, because by bringing in the donut and because of its holistic nature with the social dimensions and the ecological, we had to bring together very different departments to sit around the table and look at the big picture. And we used the donuts in the beginning as a tool to understand which are the city targets so far. We were mapping the different targets that the city has with the different themes to see where is the city sitting on the donut. And we started using it also as a compass, as a direction to design holistic strategies so that we can combine social and ecological benefits. For example, thinking about the synergy when we are designing a strategy about housing, how could we also have positive impacts on health, on education, on climate, air pollution? These people sitting around the table, each of them bringing a very different agenda and programmatic activity. They were trying to find ways that each of the developments, each of housing or any new strategy would look also at the other dimensions. And slowly we started involving the larger community of change makers in the city. So we moved out of the merely local authority space to involving more actors that they know these practices well, and they could enrich the conversation with their knowledge from the ground, and actually start thinking how each of these organizations, each of them contributes towards the vision of Amsterdam becoming a circular city, living and operating within the donut space. This all led to this strategy, Amsterdam Circular Economy Strategy, and actually a very ambitious vision of creating a thriving, regenerative, and inclusive city for all citizens while respecting the planetary boundaries. And also, the city was the first one to develop an city portrait, as we call it, the one with the four lenses, or a city donut, how I described to you the four different lenses, where they actually measure their progress through different set of indicators, some of them quantitative, some of them qualitative. And all this led to a completely new measurement framework of the city that's called Monitor, who looks also both local and global impacts of the city. The strategy has three areas of focus: food and biomass, consumer goods, and construction. And sharing a few thoughts of what it means to bring such a strategy to life. Amsterdam is looking to shorten the food value chain and provide more space for people to produce urban and peri-urban food, create a more direct link between producers and residents, and create education and awareness. On the consumer goods, the city is setting the right example by putting a target that they're gonna have their own consumption they are gonna reduce their own consumption by 20% by 2030. They are implementing circular procurement and leasing models, adopting policies of access over ownership. And on construction, they are establishing circular criteria by creating circular and socially responsible tender criteria, so that making sure that every new building or renovation is including circular materials or secondary use. They are prioritizing the reuse of existing buildings before building new ones. And they stimulate circular retrofitting, making sure that it can be applied to houses of all income, also social housing. And that's the monitor. And at the same time, we were lucky in Amsterdam to witness the formation of the Amsterdam Doughnut Coalition, which is actually a self-organized network of change makers co-leading the vision for a thriving city within the Doughnut. This is a group of actors of all types, from institutions to businesses to neighborhoods to citizens to researchers, that they are coming together to form projects and connect with the city. So it's like there is a movement from top down, from the city creating the strategy, and then there is another movement from bottom up, from all the self-organized network that wants to go and meet the city and connect and see how we are actually doing in practice. And some practical projects that the city has been developing. This is an innovative partnership for circular schools. That's one of them. That's a Klein Amsterdam all-wood modular prefabricated school. But actually, what is interesting is that the city has created this combined tendering process where 9 schools have partnered together to tender, and that drops the costs, keeps the same project team. So when one project is finished, and then the team can continue in a different project. So all the circular innovation and the materials that are going to be tested, they're going to become less expensive as they keep on building the next schools. So that's an innovative partnership. Different community land trusts, that's one in Balmer area of Amsterdam, which is, as I said, initiatives that are advocating and are buying land to making sure that it remains accessible and affordable. This is a neighborhood in Amsterdam North, the North, which has been for a while developing to become a fully circular neighborhood where it's a living lab of experimentation with recycled materials. There are circular water and waste flows, and there is a very active participatory design element where the residents are being involved in the process of design early on. And that's a living lab in Amsterdam where they are aiming at the harbor to create a living lab to test different ideas of donut economics, from very practical, creating a biodigester, to also new business models and new governance models for enterprises. And I am going to pause because I have some more examples, but I just wanted to see if people have many questions, because now we are at 45 minutes. Just maybe I will close and I can share this later if needed by this, and I'm gonna give the floor to you. I'm often asked about what has the donut done? What about the donut? Why is everybody talking about it? What has it really changed in the city and in more cities that we see? And without undermining many other things, for me, it's so important, this new narrative that it brings and weaves in, and the awareness that it creates about the big picture, about the systemic change that is needed, the combined mindset. How can we find synergies? How can we move away from silos and look at the social and ecological, and how all this is rooted in an economic system? So it's something that creates connection. And that has been extremely powerful in all places I have worked with the donut. It shifts the narrative to the right direction. It's not a solution. It's still a question. The donut is still a question, but it poses the right question. So with this, I'm going to take a break. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you were there. Unfortunately, I couldn't see you, but I'm very happy to open the stage, open the floor now to see some of there are some questions or things on the chat. Whoever wants to raise their hand and open the mic, or like I will open my camera to see more people. If you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand. And in the meantime, I will also have a look at what you were discussing. Any questions, reflection, comments? I see some people putting.
Yes,
Yeah,
Leopold put his hand up.
yeah.
Yeah, hello. Leopold from Vienna. We are a FAB region, Südburgenland, which is in Austria. And my question is, why are you always only talking about cities? What's with the rural areas? And I would be very interested how we can adapt it and how we can design a smart village. And do you know any examples like Amsterdam, but in rural areas?
Hmm. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the intervention. I've heard this before. Definitely, it's very worth thinking and taking these examples into smaller scale. I think cities become a more a first priority because of their size and their impact and the fact that they sometimes move faster into innovation. However, these models could perfectly fit into smaller scale. They could even be easier to handle and actually manifest more quickly. And there are different places localities, like let's say localities around the world that are implementing or using elements of the donut. Amsterdam is a case that we still look at because it was the first one, it was more complete. There is a small town called Tomelilla, and it's in the south of Sweden. And it's a very great example of how a place of a smaller size can take this donut and bring it to the next level. They have created a set of indicators. They are using it every year, and you can actually find the story of Tomelilla in the beautiful report that Doughnut Economics Action Lab has developed, and it's publicly available on the stories of cities. And there is also the story of Amsterdam, but also of other cities, and Tomelilla is there. I can actually put the link on the chat or share later as we are talking.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Dan. There is one document called Cities Get Started at Doughnut Economics Action Lab that summarizes all the work on cities. I see Stephanie is raising her hand, and I'm happy to take the question, but I'm also curious to hear from someone from Kenya and someone from Athens that they put some questions on the chat. Stephanie, you gonna go?
I was just wondering, like in a city like Amsterdam with the flux of tourism, how the efficiency of managing with the donut economy, with like newcomers, just an idea. But,
Yeah, it's a spot on question. And one of the first, sometimes also critiques that this work, at least to the extent that it took place in Amsterdam, hasn't really address this major sector that becomes often also a sector of and the drive of consumption and income in the city, which is often tourism nowadays. There is I don't have an example of a city that is only focusing there, but you would see that there are different ways to approach tourism to make it a bit more, let's say, sustainable across the year, uh, cherishing and strengthening local economies, and making it more an experience rather than a consuming practice. I would be very curious because I also come from Greece, and there is a big conversation since I returned back home about tourism and over tourism here. I would be very curious myself also to take the donut to this specific sector and see what we could do. But it's one of the needs to take that to that direction too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Umberto?
Hello, thank you. Very interesting conversation. I took lots of notes. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I'm Humberto from Mexico, and we are building a circular economy showroom on wheels. It's almost finished, maybe 85%. And well, the question that I have is, what are the Trojan horses that you have seen or read about to kickstart these initiatives within cities that do not have the intention to move forward on the circular path? Maybe not only with cities, but with decision makers, private and public decision makers. Do you know any like Trojan horses patterns?
You mean with Trojan horses, how you would try to bring these ideas a bit hidden so that they don't get scared or something, and that they find relevance?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So I don't have a direct answer to this. I do have a relevant answer to this. Um, these ideas, from my experience, uh, are usually already taking place in one way or another in the city. Maybe they're not going by the name donut or by the name circular, but there must be already certain movements in places that I've worked. Most often could be bottom up, but we always try to link with their needs and meet them where they are. So maybe starting to talk with the donut should not be the objective, but always understanding which is the priorities and how to meet these priorities that existing with a wave that you want to push forward. When I was started working with circular economy with cities, it wasn't a mainstream term. And I also worked with other cities beyond Amsterdam, um, that they would laugh when we would appear, or they would say, yeah, this is very Northern European, we would never do it here. Nevertheless, when you start working with them, you would see that they might have very, very interesting ambitions, initiatives already happening. The most important thing is to find a connecting narrative and also the fabric that links these actors between them. So to make it simple, meet them where they are, find what is their entry point, find where the energy is in the city. So find the innovators and those that they are already doing this work, so you don't have to build a horse by yourself, and try to make the connections between them. That would be somehow a summary without saying this is a recipe. But yeah, thank you, Roberto.
Yeah, hi. So,
Hi,
greetings from Kenya.
nice to meet you.
And
Hi.
so
So there's cities in East Africa, like Nairobi and Kigali, for example, they have a lot of potential for donor economics, right? They're fertile ground for sustainable and regenerative economic practices. But like many other growing urban centers in East Africa and in Sub-Saharan Africa, they grapple with entrenched inequality and systemic corruption, right? So this can distort like well-intentioned economic models. And so given the donut economics aims to balance social and ecological thresholds, how does this framework account for like real world power imbalances and governance challenges? Like, are there built-in safeguards and mechanisms to prevent wealth concentration and elite capture? So ensuring that the transition towards a more regenerative economy does not inadvertently deepen existing inequalities or serve the interests of a privileged few.
That's an excellent question. And the very deep conversation to take further. The truth is that donut, the way it has been applied so far, it reflects more, especially the examples of cities that I've been talking about. So far, they reflect more let's say, the global north economies, where we are looking at patterns of extraction, of overconsumption, where we are looking at the countries that they have somehow met their social foundation, but they are overshooting massively the ecological ceiling, and all these by using resources from elsewhere, by using labor from elsewhere, and creating this global inequitable model of economies. When we dig deeper into donut economics, as economic thinking, we can see conversations and principles about equitable distribution of resources, but there are even more nowadays schools and of thought that they really talk about what some people call degrowth, or how we really look into the concentration of resources in the global north, and what type of practices and strategies we should implement to drastically change this and create different allocations. The donut, just to the way I have used it and the way I think it is presented, it doesn't give you the answer to these questions. It just opens the questions. And then the way we're going to choose to work through them, it's a political conversation, it's a political act where all these deeper discussions come into play, and this deeper thinking and the political actually activity needs to come into play about how we address it. I don't know if this gives you a bit of an idea but it's the next thing. Okay, all right. Now we see it. We see who we are. We see how we operate. We see what is our impact. And now what? How do we address it? And I think Donut is opening up these questions, and it's on us and on its system that they come up to find ways to address them. Yes, thank you, Roberto. I'm curious there is a donut, just to finish, there is a Doughnut Economics Coalition in Kenya, in Nairobi, that you may want to connect with. I don't know if you know. They are quite active. Stefano Bocconi. Bocconi or Boccioni?
Yes. Oh, okay.
Hi.
Hello. Yes. Just a question about, because it looks like this model, the donut model, is quite sensitive to quantifying the borders, like because you don't necessarily define what's ecological ceiling and what is a decent way for a person to live. So I wonder if it's very sensitive to the fact that you can still adopt it, but maybe if you don't get the level quantitatively right, then your ecological ceilings will be, too high, maybe not meaningless, or otherwise the other one too. So if you have like this discussion when you set what is our threshold, so if it's very sensitive and it can make it also a method like make it useless because basically you intervene nothing because you just make it to the ceilings too high or too low and things like this.
Yeah, yeah, this is totally spot on what you're saying. I think I understand. It's like, where do we set the bar, right? Because it's very important to set the right thresholds, correct? So everybody could set the threshold and say, yeah, actually, I'm very good. I'm doing better because I'm above that. And indeed, one of the biggest discussion and the most critical part of this measurement or building such assessment which is also a political conversation, is what is our standard? Where do we set the threshold? How do we measure it? How do we quantify? And let's say with the planetary boundaries, there is a whole body of research that is doing that on a national level, and yet we are still discussing about what is the fair distribution of planetary boundaries per country, and whether also historical consumption of resources should create different thresholds and not per capita. So let's say the Netherlands that has been consuming resources for so much longer, they should have a smaller percentage. They shouldn't be measuring per capita than Kenya. But yeah, also the conversation of where a city or where an organization, a country is putting the standard to be fully within the donut, to be a regenerative and distributive, is very sophisticated act, like how you do it, and also very political. Because it's easy for cities, or let's not undermine it. We all want to show that we're doing well. So it's difficult to create a standard that actually proves that you are doing really not so well.
Was it easy in Amsterdam or how did it go this?
It's a complex conversation because it keeps on looping different people to give approval that needs alignment. Plus, the truth is that there is the quantification aspect that is complex, that's difficult anyhow, when we are talking about what's the impact of Amsterdam on the planet. And for that, we are using some global indicators that we need to downscale. That's complexity. Put on top of that, the system of the city, who makes decision, what is important to show from all the things that we measure, how do we choose which indicators prove or show how well we do. That's also a choice, right? Are you gonna show for food, for instance, how much good food is produced in the city, or how many obese people you have in the city, or how many educational programs on healthy diets you have, how many vegetarians? There are so many things, and what do you define important? It's part of your narrative, but also shows your ambition. It's a political decision. Yeah, thank you very much. Very good questions, everyone. It helps me to think along with you. Is something else, because I didn't get the chance to. Adriana is asking what indicators tackle the donut economy. Is it an adaptation for fab cities or fab labs? How to measure its impact? I'm not sure. Oh yeah, Adriana is raising her hand, so I will hear a bit more from her. Adriana, do you want to share a little bit this question?
Yes, thank you so much, first of all, for your presentation. I think that we, especially in places like Fab Labs and especially in initiatives like Fab Cities, we are working very participative, but I think that it's difficult to measure the impact. And I think that in a point of when I wrote the comment, you were talking about the indicators. how really could measure the impact. And I think that it would be very helpful if it is something especially for, yeah, for example, for fab cities, or around like how this is applied for spaces like fab labs or living labs. That would be a good tool for us to.
Mm, mm. Okay, thank you. This is, I mean, the conversation about the indicators is big, and as we're working with cities, we are also start creating a database of different indicators that can happen when it comes to built environment. And I don't know if this can be helpful for Fab Labs. Depends on how do you define yourself. Is it a building or is it an organization? But I want to take a moment to take you back to something I didn't get the chance to show you, which is this, just for you to know that it exists. And there is something called the Doughnut for Urban Development. And that's a tool that a team called Home Earth, it's a real estate architecture office from Copenhagen, together with Doughnut Economics Action Lab, they created. And it's a tool that combines indicators, social and ecological, local and global, that helps developers and architects and urban designers to create buildings that are looking into all these dimensions. And it's freely available, and you can have a look at it and download it from just Google Doughnut for Urban Development. And it looks both on-site and off-site indicators. And if you see here, just to give you a bit of a glimpse of what could be when you start creating thematic areas. For instance, if you see this is the social foundation, what would it mean? What do we measure for an urban development? If we want to measure the work aspects, we can measure how many jobs are being created, the local economy, but you can also look at the global scale, if there are fair wages in the people involved in the value chain, what is the quality of working conditions. And you can imagine, start thinking, how can I measure that? From here, it's easier to go into indicators, right? But for instance, for food, how can a development create opportunities for urban farming or provide healthy and affordable food? Or how can we look into responsible land use? So there is a whole science behind how do we develop indicators. But here, for instance, this tool took the donut, applied it to urban development, and created two of those rings, one for social and one for ecological. And it looks at all the dimensions and starts putting different indicators behind them. So depending on which direction you want to go with Fab Lab, you could take different approaches. I just wanted to give you this in case you want to dig into it, because it's freely available. And as I said, it's called Doughnut for Urban Development. Sorry. Yes, Alejandra. And just give me a note when we want to wrap it up.
Hi, Ilektra. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, for taking my question. Yes, it's still digging a bit deeper on the indicators aspect. I wonder if a good approach to choose the indicators would be based on the priorities or the objectives of who is supporting the projects that are delivering this impact. Because then they can report it and so on, but maybe it's biased. So I don't know, what's your opinion on that?
Can you say a bit more, because I didn't get it? Can you tell a bit more what you're thinking there? Who is supporting?
Yes. Yeah, you mentioned that there are plenty of indicators, right?
Yeah.
Maybe measuring and reporting all of them is not super practical. So if we have to choose a subset of indicators, is it a good approach to select them based on who is supporting the project, like who is paying for a certain project to be done or for certain solutions to be implemented? So based on what they care mostly, then we choose those indicators. Is it a good approach or is it biased? What do you think?
When you're saying paying, do you have in mind an urban development? For instance, do you have in mind a building? Like, what do you have in mind? Because for a city, this would not be the case. We have, for a city, the indicators are chosen by the staff, the policymakers who have been somehow elected by the people. So this is their job, right? So we trust them to find the best measurement that represents the voice of most of us, let's say, right? That's the system we have created. But in terms of choosing indicators, the best approach is to involve the different voices that are part of whatever you are making, so that these things that you measure represent more and exactly as much closer to what you want to do there. So it's a collective vision. If you make it more specific, maybe I can also answer more specifically.
Yes, yes. What I have in mind is it's the same project actually that Umberto mentioned. Is a regenerative marketplace for eco construction solutions. So we want to make the construction sector to use more sustainable solutions in their buildings. And then when they choose which products to buy, they might be interested in knowing the impact they are having by using them. So
now you're talking more on a product level of construction products, right? What would be the right labeling that you would want to give?
Yes, exactly.
I understand. This is not an easy answer, because on the one hand you want to keep the picture holistic, so you want to make sure that you can see as many aspects of the picture as possible, the local, the ecological, the social, all those things, and the global. And at the same time, you want to make it practical. You can't have a label that is like, so huge and they need to read. Yeah, the practice would be to find a balance between all this. Like, what are the key things that you find important to show, and make sure at least that you combine something from social, something from ecological, and something from the whole picture of the value chain, because that's what is usually lost in the picture. So at least I would try to make sure that I show this logic. I know you cannot show everything, but that this logic is there. Yeah? Does it make sense? Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Some more people before we close. I think we have 2 minutes. I'm not sure if someone wants to share something last.
Anyone with a last question or remark, Stephanie?
I'm just wondering how in underdeveloped word classification, how can you introduce the donut economy, and how in a very complex, not complex, like, okay, like now you are in a world where the US is stepping out from the ecological approach to things. You have one kind of part that is dropping out. You have Europe that is moving forward and like doing great. And what about the other parts? Like, it's very difficult. It's really amazing to see like these things been done in Amsterdam. It's like a dream setup to discuss such things. Where I live, I feel where you need.
Where do you live, Stephanie? Where do you live?
I live in Lebanon, in Byblos now. So you feel you need more awareness, like for the people before the elections, like people who, for example, in the municipality now we have election 2 months, and I don't know, like it's a disaster, like not even close to what's ideal or how I see it should be or what we should be discussing. So I find it very hard what's my role in all of this. Then I don't know, I feel more educational, but how can we approach it? And
I relate very much to what you're saying. I think more people, I don't know if they can share, but yeah, I relate a lot with what you're saying. And I'm very aware that Amsterdam and the story that I'm sharing is part of the story, and we are living in turbulent times, and things are evolving extremely fast. And sometimes we feel that all these cannot keep up with the magnitude of developments. But on a very personal note, and I also moved from Amsterdam to Athens. It's a completely different world. You need to connect always with the people that understand you and start from there. And I mean, you are part of this community. Maybe you cannot bring it directly to the municipalities in Lebanon, but there might be other things that you can do. And we have the luck also to be connected on a global level and keep on working and make progress with these changes. And if you really want to learn from these and go further, find people that they do this work. Don't break your head and be hard to yourself about bringing these to places that it can't be received, because there will be a lot of those still. I don't know if the world would change soon and if the donut will be massively, adopted soon. There might be a bit more dark times before we manage to, as humanity, find a more stable place. But we still need to create these pockets of light, and we're doing it. We just need to put our attention to where light is. But it's very, very real what you're saying also.
thanks a lot for your direction. It was really helpful to see where to move.
It's like talking to myself. Thank you too.
Okay, I think that's a great note to sign off on. We are creating these small spaces here to do something positive altogether. Well, thank you,
Yeah.
Ilektra, very much for this talk today, and everyone for the incredible engagement. One question for you, Ilektra. Could you share with me sorry for the noise in the background, the presentation, so I can
Yeah.
the presentation, so I can share it with everyone after the call.
Yeah, and Dan, could you maybe share with me the comments on the chat at the
Yes,
end?
for sure.
Just for my curiosity. Thank you.
Definitely.
Thank you very much for your attendance. So thank you for listening and sharing. It was great.
Thank you,
Thank you
Ilektra.
very much, Ilektra.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
See you
you.
in the next
Ciao,
session.
ciao.
Thank
All
you.
right. See you again. Bye.
You.